emails like that. He said, I chose hybrid because. You shouldn't have been chosen hybrid. None of us chose. You chose Facebook or
I know we're having fun speaking to everyone, but we have got so much on the agenda. And we did have 20 people speak, but I never want to say that that's something we will never stop taking the time to do. It's very important that your voices be heard. But we do have so much more to go over, and I have great empathy for the staff here because they have to stay here. Some of you people are here because you can be here and it's not your job, but we've got a lot of people on, that are actually working.
Yeah.
I see Mr. White did like me. I went back there and got me a couple of cookies. So we can make it. All right. Action agenda. Action is necessary on appropriate matters discussed in executive session. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Lovelace is going to take care of
I
that.
make the motion that we approve the actions as we discussed in the executive session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Huddle. Second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? 7. All those opposed? 0. All right. We now will get.
I don't believe, is that right?
Do you have something to
Hines?
move, Mr. Huddle?
I didn't see your
I
hand.
was in favor.
Okay.
Are you just waving down the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Approval of redistricting scenario for Piney Woods Elementary. And there's a lady over there that said if we, well, oh, excuse me, I was looking for that lady right there from the Piney Woods, and she said I better get to that item because that's why she was here. Okay. All right, do I have now this is on action, so, and we had just to refresh people, we had a workshop and got everybody kind of pulled up to speed, so we've had time for a discussion on this. So is there any motion?
Do we have a presentation first?
Oh, they gonna present, oh, wow, sorry.
If you're ready for action.
Ms. Hammond is trying to move this on, but I didn't mean to slight you guys. All right. Can they hear us? Their own?
Yes, ma'am. So, Ms. Hammond, would you request to do the presentation first, or tell me how you'd like to frame this. We have our presenters from Island Broom online that have been waiting, Mr. Zuba and Mr. Gallagher. The board has an exhibit of the PowerPoint presentation regarding the new scenarios of 5 and 6 based upon feedback and, of course, in alignment with the motion that the board passed. So, Ms. Hammond, would you like for this entire presentation to be given, or we will follow your lead?
Do I have any suggestion from the board? Do you feel like we've seen enough to not have all of it? You want to pull out like scenario 5 or 6? Yes, ma'am?
I think this is an important decision, so
Uh-huh.
I think that we should hear the
See
presentation.
them all? Okay. We will therefore go with all of them.
Mr. Zuba, if we could do a sound check first for you, and then a sound check for Mr. Gallagher.
Sound check, sound check.
Okay, Mr. Gallagher?
Sound check, sound check.
And are you all receiving us? We hear you loud and
Yes.
clear. Very good. Mr. Zuba,
Loud
I'll
and
turn it
clear.
over to you.
All right, sounds good. Pat, can you just share your screen so everybody live at the meeting could follow along with us?
We got him.
All right, we know this is run a little bit late into the night, so we will do the full presentation. I'm just going to spend the greatest amount of time touching on the newer material. For those that are new to our process, and this has been something that's been going on for about a year now, Pat and I began working with District 5 last year and have gone through an exhaustive process of looking at your enrollment drivers, housing, economy, demographics, preparing 10-year enrollment projections, and really digging deep into what it would take to be able to create an attendance zone for the grand opening of the new Piney Woods School this fall. So with that, we presented a report back in July, which looked at, for each school by grade level, enrollment projections over 10 years, identified pinch points as well as capacity needs, and really began fielding input from the community then back in July, and have been fielding input from the community ever since then, which I'll touch on in a little bit. Just a quick recap. Starting in the fall, Pat, next slide, we touched on looking at 4 different scenarios with various key points to each of them that really fed into what we were working off of as our guiding criteria. Each scenario is slightly different. Some of them looked at various grade grouping changes. They looked at different ways to be able to provide an attendance zone for the Piney Woods Elementary School, as well as to alleviate the long-term overcrowding in the Chapin cluster. These scenarios also, based on our existing conditions, looked at ways to address problems that may occur down the road over that 10-year horizon. Some of those suggestions involve changes to the feeder pattern, as well as potential phase-in redistricting at the upper level, so including both the middle school and high school in that. So they were really more comprehensive in nature, larger sweeping changes, but really ran the gambit from, say, a scenario one, which had some of the more minimal disruption, upwards to a scenario 3 and 4, which really looked at full-blown, all-out district-wide redistricting impacts. Based on the input we received and the direction from the board, we held a workshop back in about 2.5 weeks ago, for which we then produced scenarios 5 and 6. We'll talk about those in a little greater detail. As I mentioned earlier, we've been getting feedback throughout the entire process. This is just an example of that. For about a 2-week window, we ran an online survey, which really was to help us get to know your community a little better. We did a lot of work from the data enrollment demographic standpoint, but we wanted to be able to put out key questions and take about 10 minutes, and we got over 7,600 responses during that 2-week time frame, which helped us get to know what some of those key concerns were across the district. Back in October, we launched our online survey platform. Those 4 scenarios that I recapped earlier, these have been presented ever since October 12th. We had about 3,100 page views on that through the about through the midpoint of January. This viewer allowed those to be able to follow along from home. We know in the pandemic, a traditional workshop with a big board and stickies is just not possible. So it was the next best thing. Getting that input in through the redistricting website allowed Pat and I to be able to take a look at what those concerns were and really kind of work with the administration and the board as we begin to work towards our scenarios 5 and 6 that we have for tonight. So as part of our most recent updated work talking about these scenarios 5 and 6, we launched the same platform, just reorganized it slightly on the 15th, had about just over 660 page views to date on that, with the focus of the impact really being on that Chapin cluster, what it looks like there from those 2 newer scenarios. So with the 2 additional scenarios, we're now really kind of pivoting from, as I mentioned earlier, on scenarios 1 through 4, where we really took that comprehensive approach and looked at the utilization across the board, and made multiple pronged recommendations there for redistricting, as well as adjustments across all grade levels. This is really focused on the Chapin cluster. It's really geared towards these 2 scenarios, that creating that attendance zone that needs to be put in place for the opening of Piney Woods this fall. It's now looking at it as solely a grade pre-K 4, 4th grade configuration. Some of the options we had put out earlier had teased out a pre-K 5 or a pre-K 4, but the input we've gotten to date, we're now looking at an opening around a pre-K 4. And then there's no other immediate changes to intermediate, middle, or high school attendance zones. This is really just looking at a very succinct redistricting over in the Chapin cluster and only at the elementary school attendance zones. Pat, next slide. So I know a lot of the feedback was around what are going to be other changes. What does it mean for special programs? What does it mean for any of the choice? And I'll just keep reiterating as part of this, there's no changes to current open choice or magnet school programs. There's no changes to special education or programming as part of this redistricting. It is just that it's the creation of an attendance zone, and it will be the funneling of students into that new school. We recognize that in this area, through the enrollment freeze over the last several years, there are numerous students that have been impacted by the enrollment freeze as part of our work, as we've done since the fall with the redistricting. We're assuming that all of those students that are part of that enrollment freeze are going to stay in their current buildings. They will not be impacted by the redistricting. Those aren't reflected in our numbers, and there will be no changes overall to the current pre-K enrollment levels or placement of programs throughout the district. We're assuming, based on the guidance of the administration and the board, that there will be 40 additional pre-K students at Piney Woods Elementary School. With that, I'll pass the baton off to Pat to walk us through our two options for tonight.
All
Thanks,
right,
Pat.
so our options tonight are really honed in on the Chapin cluster, as Mike had mentioned, the Chapin and Lake Murray attendance zone. So scenario 5's objectives were really honed in on the Piney Woods area, open with the pre-K 4th grade configuration, and really align the boundaries to optimize travel times and traffic flow in the Chapin area, and preserve some space for future residential development in Piney Woods as well. So this map shows the boundaries under scenario 5. Route 76 really forms that northeastern boundary of Piney Woods. So really focused on the western portions of the current Chapin district. The change map highlights specifically which neighborhoods would be impacted. Call-outs represent the number of historic students that live in these areas that would be impacted under these scenarios. And as Mike had mentioned before, these numbers assume that all open choice, magnet, and special education and enrollment-free students remain in their current buildings. So those students are essentially deducted from these numbers. So the only students that move are current Chapin students who live within this pink area, and current Lake Murray students who live within this blue colored area. If a student attends another building who lives within these areas, they would stay there. So our projected enrollment, if you recall our previous presentations, we compare our enrollment to our enrollment targets, and our optimal range is operating at between 90 and 100% of the enrollment target. Near target is a little bit over the enrollment target, but still in a good range, and over target highlighted in red. Opening Piney Woods, and here we're populating it with about 430 pre-K 4 students. That allows all schools within the Chapin cluster to really operate in that optimal level, while preserving some buffer space at Piney Woods to support future housing development or program expansion in the future. And Mike, did you want to touch a little bit on methodology to address?
Yeah, Pat, and I didn't want to interrupt you in the middle of a couple of your bullets, but I will. I know I heard just a question as part of the public comment where some of the numbers, if you add them up, do not tabulate across the board. And what I want to point out is that as we're developing these are all actually projected students. They are not, full students that we're counting right now. And as we go through mathematically and do the enrollment projection, we're always carrying fractions of kids. And whenever we have, greater than a half the student, we don't add up the individual fractions. We either round up and round down at each individual grade level. So as you can imagine, a school of 812 students, say for the projected Chapin Elementary School, or 800 students next year at Chapin Elementary School, there's a lot of different grade level projections there. So as we go through our rounding process to create whole numbers of students, we always have slight discrepancies if you were to compare scenarios side by side. It doesn't take away from the accuracy of what we're doing. We couldn't be any more accurate. It just really comes down to how you handle fractions of students, and over time, especially with clients that require student-based budgets and not counting a tenth of a student here or an eighth of a student there, we've got into the practice of just rounding down or rounding up, especially as we're projecting out in years. So I do apologize for any confusion that may have caused. That's just one of the mathematical limitations of the software that we use and the methodology that we use. But it doesn't take away at all from the quality of the work that we do.
Thanks, Mike. All right, just to summarize the takeaways, some of the pros is that, again, the redistricting impacts are really honed in and focused on the Chapin cluster in Piney Woods, impacting about 8% of elementary students. We're achieving that enrollment balance in the Chapin cluster. And again, no changes to the intermediate, middle, or high school attendance zones, and maintains current feeder pattern as well. Some of the cons is that this again is a short-term effort. Some things will still need to be evaluated at the upper grades in the future as those projections hold true. And also having a majority of your buffer space in Piney Woods, although from what we've heard, that is an area that is anticipated to see some additional housing growth to fill that out over time. So scenario 6 is very similar. The assumptions are identical to those in scenario 5, except we did grab a slightly larger area to shift into Piney Woods. And I'll move to the change area map because this highlights it better. So we are grabbing some areas to the north of Route 76 under scenario 6. We're also shifting a small area of Lake Murray into Piney Woods as well to try to put some additional students there. And then we're shifting areas again of Lake Murray into Chapin to help balance enrollment across the board. One of the considerations, and I had mentioned this in some previous presentations, is size of peer groups. When you're moving big areas, the moves is much easier. When you move some small areas, then you can see here with our by grade breakdown, sometimes there's smaller peer groups, which can sometimes result in a difficult transition. So again, our enrollment projections here are showing most schools in that optimal range. Piney Woods is populated at about 460 students, Lake Murray at under 700 for most of the 10 years, and Chapin decreasing as those enrollment-free students move up into intermediate school, settling at about between 800 and 790 students. And again, we preserve most of that buffer space at Piney Woods to account for future housing development in that area, as well as potential program expansion should the board wish to explore that. So takeaways are very similar to scenario 5. We have a slightly larger redistricting impact at about 9% of elementary students, but again, we achieve that overall enrollment balance and largely maintain the status quo at the upper grades. And this does result in some better enrollment balance by shifting some additional students into Piney Woods that provide some additional flexibility at Lake Murray and Chapin. And the cons are the same as scenario 5. Again, this is a short-term focus for next year. And so some of the longer-term challenges that the intermediate, middle, and high school will need to be looked at in the future as well. So just to recap here are our scenarios that we presented to date. I won't get into all the details since you've all heard this before, but just really comparing the primary outcomes. And Mike, did you want to go over some of the discussion items that we had received over the last week or so?
I did, and Pat, we just wanted to make it just for the board. We wanted to make it part of the record, so we've included both the group's questions where necessary as well as the answers. So and it's a common question we get a lot, so I do understand it. One of the questions that we received was about being able to disaggregate the choice students from the students who attend based on attendance zone. And you know, what we find as far as our methodology, and it's pretty commonplace across the board, is when you are projecting for a given school population, we do understand that, you know, there may be choice, there may be magnet, but then again, there may also be students that are in there that, you know, are requiring special services, whether it's speech therapy, special ed, students there for, you know, various sorts of needs. We lump all those various groups together, and we project at a grade level for the entire population for that given building. We don't ever try to break out small groups based on individual needs and develop projections for that. We just know that in our experience, districts plan for those needs. There's space available offered on a case-by-case basis, and the number could actually change from year to year depending on the different, you know, populations and enrollment within the buildings themselves. And then the other question we received was really looking at the capacity for Piney Woods Elementary School. It's our understanding that the Piney Woods Elementary School has a design capacity of 700 students. From our experience, when we look at schools that group by geography, so that's street, neighborhood, subdivisions, We always establish a target about 90% of that because we know the students just never come truly packed as neatly. Plus, it provides a little headspace for growth. So we've been using an enrollment target of 630 students there. And as Pat mentioned earlier, that also provides a little bit of buffer for that area as we see some housing growth there, so the school can grow up to its overall capacity over time. Another question that we had received, this reverts back to the board workshop where we had presented these almost puzzle pieces. They were large blocks and tracts of land that had enrollment numbers in there, just to be able to work and engage with the Board of Trustees and have a more interactive session of kind of how we can put these options together. Since then, we've gone back to our software and we've just taken those planning blocks and based on the input, refined them in order to be able to look at logical boundaries and to be able to sort of get a better fine tune of our enrollment targets there. So really, that's kind of where we started at the more coarse block level. And what you're seeing tonight is really that more fine-grained of taking all those blocks, smoothing and changing the edges, and basically resulting in those colored attendance zones that that Pat had presented just a few minutes ago.
So we had a question about the number of students impacted by grade level. So those students were noted on the maps. We did provide a breakdown of historic enrollment numbers for those areas by grade. And we, again, are not moving any current choice magnet or other special programs. We have those students flagged in our database. So all of the numbers allow those students to stay in their current buildings. And finally, feedback received to date. I can speak to our virtual platform. As we mentioned earlier, we've seen an additional 660 page views since we updated the content on January 15th. And with that, we're happy to
Question?
take questions.
Okay. I will entertain any board's questions or comments. Ms. Huddle? Oh, Mr. Blum.
Dr. Milton, I see Mr. Wiseman standing in the back there. Is there any chance he could come up here? Because, you know, one of the things that back in the original part of this last year that I wanted to make certain that we covered was the transportation issue. And we were assured at that time that Mr. Wiseman had all the,
Oh, I'm smiling.
yeah,
He's smiling.
it's hard to tell. Thank you.
Mr. Lovis, I don't know exactly the questions that Mr. Wiseman can be prepared to answer, but there are processes that he's been working on, and of course, the will of the board is going to determine and guide Mr. Wiseman as to what he can expect for rerouting and redesigning transportation.
I've had a chance, matter of fact, I was out at the new school for the first time today, talked with Ms. Pascal about some of her concerns. We talked about transportation as a whole, getting into the school, getting out to the school, how that's actually going to benefit some of the high school students time-wise. So we've gone over enough, took a couple different scenarios about the overall operation. I looked at 5 and 6. I got a lot of hope for both of those. I would personally, on a transportation level, specifically look at, tweaking a couple things, but overall, I can be successful with both of those plans. But again, preference from a transportation side, there might be just a road or two I would tweak.
Well, I mean, the thing that, as a resident of Chapin, there's some things that you know from living somewhere for a few years. But what we were trying to do was keep from bucking traffic going in the opposite direction at the wrong time of day. And we thought, I would think there was a consensus, I'm not sure, but anyway, around cutting off at 76 where Publix is and all, and from there on back, and having the two peninsulas out there attend this school while not disturbing Old Lexington because of its exit strategy is very hard to get out of there, just like it is out of Amix Ferry. So That was the thought, but
That
anyway.
that was some of the areas that I would look at, just to tweak a little bit, specifically try to not go against the flow of traffic out to Piney Woods. It's doable, but it's better from a transportation standpoint if you go with the flow of traffic. So that one area on Old Lexington coming out of the city and then up there by the Peak Street area, those are the two areas that I would just, would like to be able to do some detail work on.
Well, if I hear you correctly, the one that most fits your ideal transportation would be scenario 5.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lovins. Anybody else? No other questions? If not, I can, Ms. Huddle. entertain a
Can I
motion.
make a motion?
You can, we can
All
have a.
right. I move that we implement scenario 5 for the 21-22 school year with 2 changes. 1, all property along Old Lexington will be zoned to Chapin Elementary. And number 2, pre-K 4 will be deferred for consideration dependent upon the superintendent's recommendation.
All right, is there a second? Mr. Hogan seconds. Discussion?
Can I
Yes,
explain?
I'd like to hear your reason. Yes.
I mean, I had no idea he was going to talk, but that's exactly what I was concerned about is, in 6, you've got, anybody who's ever been in Chapin, if you try to leave Chapin and go toward the interstate, there's that Peak Street and the roads don't line up. And it's a nightmare, and they have a big sign that says, "Don't pass on the right," because everybody passes on the right. And also, I believe Mungo is building roughly 300 homes across from Chapin High School. So that's my concern with scenario 6. So that's why I would recommend 5. And I would pull the Lexington. There's just 2 neighborhoods right now. The way the line is drawn on 5 right now, Fairhaven and Firebridge are on Old Lexington. They would go to Piney Woods, which means they would have to make 2 left-hand turns through downtown Chapin, or they'd probably cut through the back of Publix or go through the church. So I think those would be problematic. Also, the line is actually drawn through a large vacant area right next to that could end up being a neighborhood, and then there would be splits. There would be some of them, and so that was why I would recommend that. And then the pre-K 4, I just felt like we should pull that out because I think that I would like to see what Dr. Milton recommends for that. You know, what's the plan? How does that affect pre-K 4? I just don't think we should legislate pre-K 4 at this time. One last thing, I said 21-22 just because I've heard some concern with the line between Lake Murray and Chapin. Does it really have to be there? Could it be different? And I know that we all plan to look at the whole district as a whole, so that's the only reason I said 21-22, so that we don't set expectations that it could not change again.
Right, that makes sense. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Hine?
So I just have a question, and I guess it may be irrelevant, but I know, and Mr. Walsh, you may know this, I know that there's been conversation about that cut through that bypass with the town of Chapin that's gonna go to the interstate. So I guess that's how does that play into all of this? It may not play into this now, but I guess maybe it would play into later transportation issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do know a little bit about that because I was, on the town of Chapin group for a while. So what was planned was to come across where the old Wired Goat used to be, which is right along Chapin High School's property, and come back that way. See, the 4-lane or the 5-lane road will stop there, okay? And then it's going to turn, as an exit and go down the Chapin High School property and come out on Weiss Street. And I own some property right there on Weiss Street, so I know about this. Then it was going to cut through the back of where GIS is and come out to to Amex Ferry.
Right by Publix, is that like right where
Yeah,
we're
it's
talking
going
about?
to come right,
Like, isn't it supposed
right
to
in that
cut
piece of
through
property, I think, that Kathy was talking about. But anyway, that road will eventually be our nice parkway, okay? And it'll come out somewhere near the Catholic Church, somewhere in that, maybe a little bit further down.
Right. I guess that the reason I'm bringing it up is because, and I guess because it's not happening yet, it won't matter for next year. That if it would ease the transportation from those neighborhoods where we would end up rezoning them again because they fit into that number.
I mean, they say they're buying,
Right, I mean,
buying
I know,
right-of-ways and all
I've been
that.
involved with that as well, and it's never, I mean, it hasn't happened yet. So I just wanted to raise that concern and see if anybody had any information about that.
That's what I understood they were gonna do, is if anybody's got any better information, you know, Mr. Weiss.
I just looked at that long-term for about a 5 to 8 year period. In fact, I was out at the new area back across Chapin High School today, just looking at all the potential homes there. I think this particular plan to 5, again, I would look at that peak area just as an option of staying either at Lake Murray or going to Chapin Elementary, just for that particular reason. But it's, with 5 as a basic of your plan, it would work. But again, that's just one of the other areas I would tweak. But with that corridor, that road they're looking at, it will work. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Melton, I certainly see the merit in the ideas with this one. Will Lake Murray Elementary, though I'm looking at scenario 5, even though it doesn't cut the number there as much, they'll be okay. They're not going to be so overcrowded that we need to worry about. I mean, I agree with Ms. Huddle and Mr. Lovis about not moving kids and then there's going to be growth and then move a line again. I just agree with that for kids. Kids need the continuity and the consistency. But I thought I would just bring that up. You're okay, which would be my question to you, that Lake Murray Elementary and Chapin Elementary might be overcrowded, that they aren't in good shape.
This will definitely help those two schools, and Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Zuba, for your reference, we're looking at slide 22, for you to hone in on that. If you'll pull that up for everyone to see, to make sure we're looking at the same one. So with this chart and recap of scenario impact, still would leave those schools on higher than average elementary school, of course, but it will certainly assist with some of the crowding that's with the current assignments that we have there now. Mr. Zuber, Mr. Gallagher, anything you'd like to add?
I think we're good. Anything?
No, I think it's just, if we can get, I was trying to write down some of the notes. Pat and I could just, if it's scenario 5, we could take a look and make a couple of the tweaks that were mentioned, and then give a refresh set of numbers to get it a little bit more exact. These reflect it exactly without any of the additional transportation changes. So if they are close to as we're showing here, I think, it's going to provide the relief, at the schools, but it'll be something that you will have to, be mindful of the enrollment at Chapin and at Lake Murray going forward still.
Right. Yes.
So I have a question as to Ms. Huddle's motion about pre-K and why, just the train of thought, I guess, on that, and kind of maybe Dr. Melton's feedback on that. We asked that we kind of talked about the importance of pre-K at our workshop, and we gave those parameters to the consultant. So I guess I'm a little confused as to why we would remove them now. And I understand, we don't want to legislate the grades and all of that. So I guess I'm asking for Dr. Melton's feedback on that. I mean, if we're trying to approve a plan, if that is a dramatic change where we can't approve a plan tonight, or the reasoning behind it, I personally, I'm a fan of having pre-K in the schools if we have the funding. So I'm just curious as to that motion.
Yeah, I'm a fan too. I just didn't want to legislate it because I felt like Dr. Melton needed an opportunity to look at it and say, does it fit there? Will there be enough kids to go? That kind of thing. Doesn't mean we can't do it. I just was uncomfortable legislating it, but would like to know, Doctor, I'll take it out if Dr. Melton thinks we ought to do it.
How do you feel, Dr. Melton? You like it leaving some flexibility for you?
Well, pre-kindergarten is going to depend on the number of students that are tested and qualify for the programs, and of course the capacity of the classes. So 40, of course, is 2 classes, 20 each of the PK classes or 4K classes. If it's removed, and I'm thinking out loud, if it's removed and there's a need, I think I hear Ms. Huddle saying that I would bring it back and suggest that pre-kindergarten be added. Currently, Chapin Elementary has pre-kindergarten, but Lake Murray Elementary does not. So that, I'm not saying it's going to increase the capacity of pre-kindergarten in the Chapin area, but we heard loud and clear during the work session, there is interest in this board of pre-kindergarten services. So if that is the case, it helps us to prepare for capacity on the higher end rather than lower. Because knowing if we're looking for 2 classes, it gives us the opportunity to make sure there's space and staffing for that. So as I continue to think out loud and being the extrovert that I am, I have to process that, my apologies.
It's okay.
Having it in there will give us some direction to know. Having it not in there, we could still bring it back to change that configuration so we could make either work. And if it is in there and we see that we do not have the interest for or the qualification for 2 classes, it is our practice in District 5 to move the classes where there's a higher need to warrant it. But having it in there would give us the opportunity to include pre-kindergarten, but if not, we could certainly bring it back to the board for discussion and whatever action the board may choose to take. We can make it work either way is what all that to say, we can make it work either direction. My apologies.
That's why she's so good. She's very thorough.
I'm thinking, I'm sorry.
So
I
you
just
want to
didn't want
repeat
to
the
force
motion?
it, is all. That was the only reason. I just didn't want to force it. There's also probably, I mean, I don't know exactly how it all works, but I think there's a cost element. Like, what if you expect 40, but you get 25? I mean, I just wanted to leave it open, but I can understand if the other board members want to amend my motion.
Well, maybe you didn't make it. You
Well,
didn't make.
I
You
can
asked a
make- I
question.
can make an amendment.
If you,
I mean,
if,
I can
is
make
that
a
what
motion,
Dr. Milton likes?
But I want it to be Dr. Milton's.
I'm trying to give you the say. So are you? And I realize you said it'll work either way, but if you'll feel better just where it's just not in there, that we don't mention it. You want the amendment. She wants the amendment, Dr. Milton. I guess we'll. Okay, Ms.
I
Hines.
guess my question is I wanted, I hate to say I
Trying
want
to
a
make
direct
this-
answer.
I'm
I
trying to
wanna
make this
know
go
what you would
fast.
prefer. I mean, I can make the motion that we, I amend Ms. Huddle's, I make the motion to amend Ms. Huddle's amendment to
Motion.
re-include pre-K into the plan.
Ms. Hammond, may I?
You know what? You think out loud again, Dr. Milton.
if-
You go
if-
right ahead.
If we keep it as it currently is,
Yeah.
then that will help us with scheduling, and that would take away some of the additional decision-making perhaps, based upon the guidance from the board work session, if we keep it as it is, and that will let us know that we still are standing by through 4th grade, and it gives us the opportunity for pre-kindergarten so that Dr. Harris and staff can get started with their testing and looking at need. And then if we decide that it doesn't warrant 2 classes but 1, we'll update the board when it's appropriate.
Would you friendly remove your
I will.
an
I
idea to
withdraw
amend the
my
amendment?
motion.
All right, so let's vote on this.
I just want to have one thing to say, one thing. This is for the people in Irmo, because part of this, redistricting plan was to look at Irmo. And I wanted to make sure that, the reason we didn't want to proceed on with anything else was because of COVID. We have so much going on, and we were just, covered up with all, everything. So we didn't want to create any more disturbance. But I think that we ought to say to the people of Irmo that we're coming back to look at this in at least a couple of years.
And you mean the whole redistricting?
Yes.
Because there's a principal back there named Miss Pascal that knows she needs to get moving on Piney Woods, and that was why that's on there. Out of order. I'm always out of order. I know. All right, Ms. Huddles, if you want to read it again, it's late. Let's move it.
I move that we implement scenario 5 for the 21-22 school year with 2 changes. 1, all property along Old Lexington Highway will be zoned to Chapin Elementary School, and 2, pre-K-4 will be deferred for consideration based on the superintendent's recommendations.
All right, all those in favor of Ms. Huddle's motion, raise your hand. I think that's a 7 and no opposed. Thank you.
Ms.
Ms.
Hammond,
Pascal, you can go home.
can I make a recommendation?
Sure.
That we pare this agenda down to what's
Yeah.
critical? I mean, they've got staff, they gotta go to
I
work
just sent
tomorrow.
her a note to
Okay.
let her say that. Mr. White's idea is great. I just sent a note to Dr. Melton. There may be some things. One, Mr. White, I think the calendar, I won't miss, Dr. Melton, I mean, I've been to the board meetings till 12 and 1 myself, but not that I like it. But anything you know we have to do, don't feel bad to tell us we gotta stay, because we gotta get it over with. That's one reason we're adding meetings. I don't think we should have cut meetings. We could have gotten more done
Which
maybe.
means we have to address number 18.
Yeah, some of them don't we have to.
Don't we have to individually?
Yeah, addition of regular board meetings, we won't meet again. We can't leave out 18.
Can we just maybe go through them individually?
And don't you think the COVID for teachers related sick leave has to be done?
Yes, Ms. Hammond, if you're looking towards what the staff needs, we need
Right.
number 15.
Okay,
And this is a COVID-related sick leave. We need organization of instruction and distance online because of where we are with planning for next year, staffing. If
so that's 50, do I have it right?
16 and 17. And then, of course, for moving from discussion to action in further upcoming meetings, proposed calendar for 21, 22, because we, of course,
You just need to know
there are
that now.
things on here, and I appreciate the sensitivity for the staff, because our students will be welcomed in this space in just a few hours, and our administrators and staff need to turn this place around, so I appreciate the sensitivity to them, but unfortunately, there are things here that are very important that are time-sensitive.
I know, and I agree with you, but I just sent her a note, Mr. White, seeing what you just said. But I wanted her, all right, so that goes to, we've got 13. So we can go to 15, COVID-19 related sick leave.
Chairman Hammond, I don't think we can just
No, we can't. We have to have a
unilaterally
motion.
take 14 off.
Wait a minute, which one? You want to do that
Yes,
one?
and I move this as a first reading, and since we will have
Okay.
another reading,
Okay,
I move that we accept the first reading of policy BDE
Okay.
board committees.
And I second.
all right. Is there a second?
I second.
Have a second with Ms. Gardner. Discussion.
Well, I don't believe that we've had a first reading, so I'm just going to
Okay,
say
you
that.
can, you've
I
let us.
made the motion that we approve the first reading of revisions to policy BDE board committees.
Okay. And you second it,
Yeah, I
Ms. Gardner?
seconded it.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
I'm curious about Ms. Hines' question about whether this is the first reading.
Well, I have Ms. White here instead of, let me ask.
If we're gonna make this
No, I'm gonna get a legal opinion.
Well, let me ask a question, because I did talk to Andre in the hallway about why this wasn't 2 readings, and whether or not, you suspend policy when you don't have 2 readings. You normally do that in an event of emergency, and there's nothing emergency here. I made a motion earlier to, a couple of things that was denied, but one thing I would want to do, if the board doesn't want to do it, is get some input from the School Board Association, even if I gotta do that myself. But it really isn't a discussion, and what's the problem with this being a discussion and then there's 2 readings? I mean, there's not a
We had a
race here.
discussion, and I just made a motion. I move that we approve the first reading of the revisions to policy BDE.
And we
And
had
a discussion on the last agenda.
We
We
did.
just approved the minutes for it.
Ms. White, do you want to give us one more? I can tell you, we had it on the discussion last time. It was totally discussed, and so that's what I was told by school board. So we could, once you discussed it, then you can have your
Right,
first
you
reading.
can have your first reading,
Right.
that is correct. And of course, there will be another opportunity for discussion
Right.
before you give it
Doesn't mean
second
it's passed,
reading,
that's right.
right? So there'll be
Yeah.
another opportunity
Yes.
for that.
It'll be discussed before
Correct,
it's. okay.
correct.
Well, let's vote. All those in favor of first reading of Ms. Huddle's? Okay, 7 and 0. Okay, let's move it. COVID-19 related sick leave. Teachers really do want to hear this. This is major. Dr. Melton.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Hammond. I'm going to ask Dr. Turner, our Chief of Human Resources, to come to the podium. Board members, this is Exhibit E. Dr. Turner.
This motion would allow the board to extend sick leave to employees And I want to make sure that we reiterate that it's inclusive of teachers, but all staff, custodians, food service workers, anyone who has to quarantine or isolate. This would allow the extension of the additional 10 days of emergency leave. And that original order expired or sunset December 31st.
Dr. Turner, in relation to the lady that asked us about, that this actually was, it ended what in Dr. Melton, in November? Or was it?
December 31st
December.
is when it sunset.
Can it be retroactive for those teachers?
The motion is inclusive of it being retroactive
Great.
to January 1st.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So do I hear a,
I've got a question about
okay,
this.
yeah, question?
Okay, so does anybody have any idea what this, or this is gonna cost?
The cost would be variable. What I do have is a total number of employees. This isn't a bank that everyone gets. It's afforded as needed. So what we know is from April until December 31st, when it's sunset, we had about 316 employees take advantage of some increment of leave from 1 day to 10 days. And so it has a variable cost because it's issued as needed and only for the days that qualify for a COVID-19 related reason.
Do you have any idea what that costs for that 300, what'd you say, 338?
We could do a data dig for that to get a specific amount for you, and I can look to assistance in finance for that. The amount is going to be variable because the positions and rate of pay.
Yeah, I
vary.
mean, I realize that, but I was just on an average basis for the first semester, we should have a figure. And
We
then
do. I don't have it for you tonight, but if it's something that you would like, we can certainly get that
And we
for
could
you.
project that for the second semester, right?
Yes, sir, we can get that
I
information
mean,
for you.
who knows, it might be a lot different, but at least we'd have some basis to.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Turner, I have a question. With the COVID ending, has there not been other, and I may have misunderstood this, other COVID money that comes? Do we have discretionary, we can choose where that money can be used if we did need it for here? I mean, that's.
Yes, ma'am, that would be covered. Dr. Melton made mention of those ESSER 2 funds. And
what I-
Superintendent Spearman also released that memorandum strongly recommending that school district use the
It for that.
ESSER 2 for this purpose.
Good.
And so that would be where the funding would come from.
Well, this is just an opinion, but I would say that with the work our teachers are doing and staff, whether they work in the cafeteria or they're driving a bus, I certainly think that's one of the most important places to put COVID funds if we have the ability to put them there. So I support this.
But the ESSER 2 funds enough to cover, what the whole cost of it? Or would we have to go into fund balance to pay for some of that? That's all I was trying to figure out.
Yes, sir. It's difficult for us, of course, to project, but
Yeah.
as you're asking, we can look for an analysis
I
of
know.
average.
No, none of us have crystal balls.
Yeah, that's, unfortunately, you're right. So what we would do, Mr. Lovis, is once we've had this technical assistance webinar that the department's supposed to have in the month of February, we're told early February. As soon as we've had that, we'll have more insight as far as we have some estimates of the funds that we can expect, but we've not had the definite memorandum to let us know the value, the bottom line of the numbers. And of course, we have to create a plan that's then submitted, and there's certain protocols that we'll have to show to the State Department of Education before we start using them. But this could definitely become one of the items that we need to make as a priority in that plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it needs to be done.
And I think it helps that, to me, for teachers that are already worrying, or any employees with our schools, and we are trying to have them open, to me, it's security in their minds and not taking away their money.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's vote on it. Let's get it passed.
Yeah.
and
Wait,
keep
can
going.
I just ask real quick?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Gardner.
It's a two-part question. So this specifically would be for just COVID-related issues, number one. And two, can you explain what those issues might include?
Absolutely. These would be for the same COVID-specific reasons that were previously covered under the FFCRA, which was that Families First Coronavirus Relief Act. The specific qualifying reasons were the employee being subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. The second reason, if the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine related to COVID-19. And the third reason is if the employee is experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and is seeking a medical diagnosis.
So just to follow up, that doesn't include like family, if they have a child that had a COVID quarantine, they couldn't stay out with this?
This was that portion was covered under a separate act. This does not extend that act. The board could certainly do above and beyond what we're proposing in this motion, but this adds the 10 days separate from the child care that was covered under that emergency FMLA extension.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, ready to vote?
One, can I ask real quick, I just want to confirm, you said 316 days were used last year?
No, ma'am, when I said that number, that was the number of employees that took advantage
Okay.
of the,
But we don't know the actual number of days.
no, it was some range of between 1 to the full 8. And we could certainly do that data dig if
No, I
that's
think we
something.
need to go ahead.
Okay.
Personally, the only thing I would add is I asked a lot of questions about this, and I appreciate the information that you sent.
You're welcome.
The policy you sent, I think, would run through June 30th.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the only counsel I have for our board is that when we make the motion, that it matches the policy.
So are you worried about the way this?
I don't think it says the date on this.
It doesn't have a date, Dr. Milton?
Yeah, but the policy that she sent actually runs it through June 30th.
We could easily align it to the policy, and then as we're nearing the new academic year, we could bring it back and ask for an update, and that too would be inclusive of the funds that Mr. Lovelace is asking about to make sure that we could carry over into the new fiscal year.
So do you need anything added to this motion, Dr. Milton? Is it just pass as, is it to read this one again? When the motion, need that time frame added to it?
You want me to make the motion?
Yeah, if
Okay.
you want.
I move that the administration creates an emergency leave plan using ESSER funds to ensure those that need to take paid leave for COVID-19 related issues may do so through June 30th, 2021.
Oh, okay. I'll add that.
One second.
And it's second by Mr. Lovelace. Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of Ms. Huddle's motion? 7 and 0? Good. That'll make some teachers relieved. And then you said you need to do 17, correct? 'Cause you-
16 and 17 is
16.
helpful because of the choice window that we're
Okay.
in. Yes, ma'am.
Second reading, do we have a motion for second reading approval of proposed revisions policy, i.e. organization of instruction?
Ms. Hammond, I would like to move that we defer these. I understand that Dr. Milton wants them passed. My concern is that these are for 5, and that's a huge undertaking with implications for the budget, implications for staffing, and I would like to see us review a plan and budget for 5 before we approve policy changes for 5.
Well, can I ask Dr. Melton if she has a budget for this before we do that? Since she said you said you need them, do you, I mean, I understand Ms. Huddle's point. Have you got a budget?
Well, there's some questions submitted by the board that we tried to send a summary earlier today, this afternoon, and we knew that it would help to have context for people to explain. As we're in the choice window, it's helpful for our families to know where they would have choice, because we could have families that choose or choose not to participate in choice, expecting to have 5 as an opportunity. So we do know that that's going to be a need. As far as a budget itself, as you read the notes that we sent out this afternoon, there are a lot of cost neutral, because when it comes to some of the things, all students are going to receive devices and those kinds of operational, but I would certainly defer to the will of the board.
Okay.
I asked, and what we received, I wrote a letter to Dr. Milton, and what I received back was the cost for not doing it, which, I understand. But I think what we were looking for was some graduated cost based on if you had 500 students, if you had 2,500 students, or if you had 3,500 or whatever you want to, whatever you want to do, but we need to know the incremental cost. We have 4,880 students, I think, right now in 5. Is that right, Dr. Melton?
I can't say with accuracy, David.
I think that's what it said. What do you want?
4,558.
Okay, 4,558. But anyway, so, you know, what we were looking for, what I was looking for, and I hoped everybody else was too, that we could see how many students that we projected, and I know Dr. Harris talked about that last time. But is there any way we could just do a quick, I know it's not quick, but a survey to find out how many people are interested in this? Because, you know, or either set a not to exceed limit or something like that. I mean, you know, and I don't know how to, I'm just worried about, worried about cost in all conditions, because, you know, that may be a overriding issue for everything, you know, and I don't know if I might have turned out of line with that, but that's my feeling anyway.
Ms. Hines?
So I would say I understand the long-term implications of the 5 policy. However, I mean, they have indicated the cost, that it would be, the projected cost for licensing and programming exclusive to 5 is about $60,000. And that there's not any projected consulting cost, and they kind of went through those numbers that we've been provided. I would say, given the current climate, and the fact that we have, you know, 4,500 students that are currently participating into 5, I would think that it would be good for the district to at least offer that choice for next year. I mean, if the board would be willing, I mean, I don't know what the thoughts of taking and beyond out, but I think that we've kind of seen how that virtual platform does work for students. And if we don't offer that, there are other virtual options for students that will take District 5 students out of District 5.
Ms. Hines, I think you make a good point, and I don't think Ms. Huddle is saying it's not a good idea, or Mr. Lovelace is saying that. I think they're saying, you know, could we have some idea of how many would want to do it? You know, we're saying we think they will, but I think they're just asking for some data. I don't think anybody wants to do away with it. I just needed to know, and we as a board need to know if Dr. Melton can wait till the next meeting with that information, or it's gonna
So I have,
hamstring.
can I follow up on that just to kind of clarify where I am with what you just said? I totally understand that. I just think that if we're in that choice format right now where they're gathering data about how many students are going to participate or express interest, I mean, if we don't offer it, like right now, I mean, we have to be able to offer it for us to know those students that are going to apply for that choice.
Well, I think
Am I
Mr.
correct, or
Lovelace-
am I could be wrong.
Well, he just mentioned a survey where you would ask right
But
now, then you'd know.
choices-
Well, look, it's late. We won't argue about it. You made a great point. We heard it. Mr. Hogan, you had your hand up.
No, I didn't.
Okay,
I
you
did.
had your hand up.
The
Let's
only thing that, I want to make sure of is
move
that
it.
that we're going to go down this road, you know, this is forever, okay? This is not something that you're going to turn off the switch, and it's not going to be. So if it's, and I mean, Dr. Melton, I don't know, you know, I'm not the expert on education, but I just want to be assured that when we do this, that the quality of what we're doing is equal to, you know, or the best that we can do to simulate a in classroom situation. That's really there's two things that bother me, is that once we do it, we're doing it forever. You know, can we do it successfully and not be, you know, overly expensive? And then the second thing is the quality of what we're offering. And if, you know, I know that nobody here believes that we would not offer something, you know. But anyway, those are the two things.
Would it be hiring new FTEs, or they would probably be teachers we already have hired that would be, you would offer, how many want to go to 5?
We would move staff depending on the needs of the students. So staff would follow the enrollment of students, and if, depending on what the board decides to do, if we were to add this in the window of choice, that would in a sense serve as what Mr. Lovis is asking of the survey. And I'll use Spring Hill as an example. Spring Hill High School, of course, we limit the incoming freshman class and we cap, different available seats. So if we were to bring back to the board, here's what we have seen from those that are asking for this. It's the confusion of a parent that may come back in a few months and say, well, I would have sought choice for program A or B, but I didn't know then that I was waiting on 5. So some of that's going to really help us to find out how to message this to families, because if we have this number of families that participate in choice, that get assignments, and then change to 5, that completely disrupts the choice process that we've been trying to create and have done it fairly successfully.
And I think I understood from you, if you felt if we didn't offer this, that students that really have decided they like virtual, nothing to do with COVID, but when it's over, that they may go, we would lose that money of that student going to another, a virtual academy that the state may put. Ms. Huddle.
I'd just like to make one final point. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just
Yeah, I know that.
I'm just recommending that we defer it, because we're not like a business that can just go make more money. So we get X dollars per student. If this program costs us more than our average cost, then we'll actually be detracting from face-to-face, in-school education. That's one issue. We also could be, depending on how many children sign up for it, we could have problems with student-teacher ratios, where we have to have higher ratios in some areas because we didn't get enough students sign up. Or I would just like to see a plan, because as Mr. Lovelace said, I think this is forever. I'm praying that the bulk of this pandemic is over by summer, with vaccines and stuff. So we're doing this because we're thinking we're going to do it forever. And I just want to make sure that we're not shortchanging our teachers or our students when we do it.
Well, let me get clarification. Ms. White, since that's on the action agenda, should I still offer it as a vote on tonight, or a
Well, I
vote
make
to
a
amend?
motion to
Okay,
defer
all right.
it
All right, I'll
till
take
we
the
get
motion. That's
budget
what
and plan.
I
And
gotta
think
have a
I
motion.
second.
I've got a question here.
Before the motion, or you want to do it?
No, I want to ask a question.
Okay.
I mean, I'm hearing board members say this is forever. Is this forever? I mean, why can't you, if you're using existing teachers and this doesn't work, why are we stuck with it forever?
I didn't say that.
But when I look at the policies that Mr. Giuliano has of Exhibit F and G, of using the organization instruction, policies can be revised at any point. I think that what I'm hearing is we know that virtual learning, our teachers have successfully proven that School District 5 can offer a virtual option. So, and knowing now that it's 2021, there are many families that are going to take advantage of that, whether there's a pandemic or not. We have teachers that are enjoying the process and already asking, can they teach in this platform next year? So I think that's what I'm hearing. I'm not trying to speak for any board member, but I do think that it is something that is not necessarily of the future, but of the reality of how we currently operate. The board could certainly limit the number of students, but one of the things we've dealt with this academic year that you've heard tonight is when you offer 2 models and there needs to be a third, how we're stretching resources and helping families find the right fit for their child. So we're going to work however we can to make things successful. And as far as the effectiveness of it, research and education shows it takes 3 to 4 years to really see. So you can do initial reviews of things, a program evaluation, but with one tweak of a variable, it's going to change the success of the program. So if the board were to say for the academic year 21-22, you wanted to create a certain limit, but the cost analysis during a pandemic is going to be much different than a cost analysis hopefully for the next year or 2. But there's also been a reallocation of resources of, as you've read this content, of how much of this is being offered across School District 5. So the cost specifically for being an e-learning district, which we have to remember we are one of those, assuming that the state government continues that, and then add to that 5 as a model. Much of the money that's been spent is going to benefit all students, I would suggest.
So what was your basis for saying you needed this tonight?
We are in the choice application process. So we see that these 2 policies complement the choice process. So if we're going to add 5 as a choice, currently the choice application is open and doesn't include 5. So we could potentially have families that are choosing their top 2 choices. It could be to stay in their home school, it could be to seek a magnet program, it could be to seek a school of choice. And then if we were to add 5 later, that could then lead to changing the choice process of which we're currently investing energy and resources.
Do you do that in February? That's when you do your,
It's, yes, ma'am, we do the
we don't-
assignments and accept the assignments in February.
and
Yes,
we don't
ma'am.
have another meeting till
February the 8th.
February 8th. That'd be too late, Dr. Milton.
I believe the time that we brought this forth, was there a meeting scheduled February the 8th, or is that going to be
That's on
one of the
this.
new, that's one of the
That's
new
one
ones?
of our new meetings,
So-
if that would help you.
I'll defer to the board, Ms. Hammond.
But does it mess you up if it's deferred? That's the question.
Mess me up.
Well, that's
Not sure how
Southern
to-
for, will it just
Does it
really?
affect our communications? Yes, sir. Does it affect the process of the choice window? Yes, sir. We will try to communicate this as effectively as possible, but I do need to cite that it will be disruptive to the choice process.
Okay. Okay, well, then you just heard that. I think we've talked it to death. I really do. All right, your motion again?
I move that we defer a vote on, oh man, I'm sorry, it's getting late.
It's late.
I move that we defer a vote on policy, on the second reading of policy approval for proposed revisions to policy IE and UNDAA until a budget and plan for 5 has been presented and approved by the board.
Okay. Now, let's have all those in,
There's a correction on that, it's IJNDAA. It looks like a U, but it's not.
Thank you. IJNDAA.
it's number 17, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't mind that correction? All right, those in favor of,
You got a second?
oh, I thought we had the, I'm sorry. Ms. Gardner, seconds. All right. Now, we've discussed. Let's go for it. All those in favor of Ms. Huddle's motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 3. All those opposed? 4. No, yeah, 4. Oh, okay. All right, so you can move forward with that, but I would hope that by
I
having.
think we still have to approve
We
the
have to
second
vote.
reading of each one.
I'll make a motion that we approve the second reading of proposed revisions to policy IE, Organization of Instruction, attached to Exhibit F.
I'll second that. Okay. Now, discussion. I would like to say, I'm sorry, I was beating the gun and trying to get us out of here too fast. What I would like to say, though, Dr. Melton, I think that Ms. Huddle's motion made sense in a conservative way and about money. So if you could, this way I hope you can come back to us with the numbers and the cost, because you'll be able to have them sign up for it. At least we'll get, like the survey that you want could be done. Hopefully, we'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That's what I'm thinking.
Are we going to do a survey?
Well, she's saying that if she's going to put this out about what people want, like for next year. So she would get, I would think you could come back to us with that, how many want this program.
We could add this as the choice application. We would hold those random lottery and then put this out. So we would have to create that structure to make sure that,
Yeah.
so is it a survey necessarily? It's more of I would opt in if given this opportunity, and then I can bring it back to you all and say, we have X number of students in the elementary range that have requested this, in the high school range, and that's where some of the vetting and the cost would come into effect of how we would make sure that we scheduled and staffed appropriately. And then, of course, the board could be involved with the structure of that.
Can you do that without a whole lot of problem?
Yeah, that's what we're asking.
I mean, that's what, you know, you can do that if we vote to tonight to give you
Just
that
to open
latitude?
the application, yes, sir. We could open the application and have a window of time for that so that families could say, if giving a choice, I would choose 5 as my first choice, and then I would choose this program as my second, whether that's my home school, a magnet school, or school of choice, so we could add that in. So yes, sir, that would help us get some data.
Okay, so that motion,
Well,
that you,
Ms. Gardner wants to
okay, I'm
speak.
sorry.
Well, I just have a question. So what if, this what if scenario, what if, right now we have 4,500 plus, what if you come back and there's only 200 people that want to do it in elementary school? Would you be able to how much, to me, that's what worries me about the cost is that cost effective, and do we have to hold to that if it's going to actually not be cost effective because of the way this is worded? Do we have to hold it no matter what? Can the wording not be a little bit more relaxed it says the district will offer a choice-based virtual program, but couldn't we put the words in there if,
If the numbers,
yes, the state,
Warranted.
yeah.
is that good?
If you want to set a minimum, if you'd like to set that, or,
Well, we would
upon
need from
analysis,
you that number though. I don't know what it is. So that's why we were asking for costs and things like that.
Well,
So-
if the extreme of 200, Ms. Gardner, were to be sought, and I don't think it would be, I think there's going to be a high number of families that would be interested in that. And I do think because of the success of our teachers, there may even be a higher interest because there's been such a successful introduction to this. So we would look to see staffing-wise what the ranges would be, so we would scale it appropriately. It would not be our intent to let this lead towards a financial loss for School District 5. Instead,
other
it's to make
students.
sure that we keep students in School District 5 with the quality of program that we offer, so that other programs can be competitive as well.
Dr. Melton, would you have to hire principals and vice principals and all that for 5? Where would it be housed?
Currently, we of course have Dr. Blunt and Ms. Lunsford involved with leading because of the size of those schools. Depending on the interest and how the board were to support the scale of that, then that would be something we would look towards, is how might those positions be used. And I'm being cautious because when you got staff members that have committed, whether you're teachers or support staff or administrators, every school has an administrator that is assigned to be supportive of 5. So you may be housed at a school, but you're also the liaison between students of your school and the 5 model. So we would definitely have a staffing plan, but we need the number of students that are interested before we bring that plan to you to make sure that we're in compliance with the State Department of Education staffing and School District 5 expectations as well.
So if this motion passes, you would be able to bring to us the amount it would cost based on the number of people that, not a survey, but your people that are saying, I'm interested in this.
We could
And
bring
we
you a
could-
better estimate, yes, ma'am.
Could we still, as a board, limit it if we see it
Yes, ma'am.
draining funds from,
Yes, ma'am.
as Ms. Huddle said, from the average classroom? Because we don't want that to happen.
Yes, ma'am. I don't know that we can bring you the cost analysis to the detail of commitment, but we can bring you a better range as to what the estimates would be.
And we could set, if the board wishes, we could set a number, a limit on the number that we would allow. Just a cutoff number. Is that,
Well, Dr. Melton would have to give us a minimum number that would make sense to do. We would just have to have that from you, and that's, none of us know what that is, so we're just gonna have to take it on faith.
well, let's
Ms.
vote.
I would
Hanlon, I'd
like
like
to
to call
amend.
for the question.
Yeah, I'm
And
ready.
we can work out the scaling stuff later.
I'm
We
ready.
can come back. We don't
I'm
need to sit up here all night
I'd
debating.
like to make an
things whenever
amendment.
it's all-
Okay,
I move that we amend proposed policy, i.e. organization of instruction, to say that to replace the word will with the word may. So that instead of reading the district will offer a choice-based virtual program for students in grades K through 12, beginning with the 2021 school year, it will say the district may offer a choice-based virtual program.
is there a second?
That's it.
Okay, there's a second, Ms. Gardner. All those in favor of that motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, excuse me, 5. And those opposed? 2. Okay, and then we go back to the original. I'm lost.
The original, yeah.
I'm ready.
To approve
All right,
second reading.
so let's have the original motion. Do I have someone give it to me?
I can do it.
Yeah, I move that we give second reading approval to proposal revisions to policy IE, organization of instruction as amended.
Is there a second? There's a second. All those in favor? 7. All those opposed? 0. Oh, great. What number? Next.
17.
Ready. Second reading approval of proposed revision to policy UNDAA, distance, online, and virtual education. How's that different from what we just did? I'll give that to you, Dr.
Mr. Giuliano, anything you'd like to add? There's definitely I can't see him. Mr. Giuliano is still here, isn't he?
He's over there.
Anything
He's
you'd like to
over
add that hasn't been discussed? Because these definitely, they are entangled because of the content. So anything, Mr. Giuliano, that you'd like to add that has not been shared with the board as far as context?
I think the only thing that I'll add for context is with the change in the language, as I read it to be may, we'll be asking families for selecting something that may or may not be available to them. Typically in our choice application window, when we put our choices out and we put our magnet programs out, those are opportunities that are certainly available to them based upon the application process. If we were to survey them now, it's more of a survey than a commitment, so it could lead to some possible confusion amongst our families because they're used to committing choice 1, choice 2 versus would you be interested if this program is offered. So that's the only component that I'll add to that is it's more of a survey versus a commitment that we typically do with our families.
What I would say to those parents is if enough of them say yes, it will happen. I mean, I look at it that way too.
And one other thing we'll have to ask is we're in the process now where they're choosing their selections of where they would like to attend in rank order. So that application window will have to close and we'll have to run that lottery for us to be able to then go back, if this is approved, to then go back and say, that was your first choice. Would 5 become your new first choice, or would 5 be your, not your first choice? So it's just going back and repeating the process too. Those are just components to add.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Giuliano? Okay, do I have a motion? Ms. Gardner.
I make a motion that we have second reading approval of proposed revisions to policy IJNDAA, distance online and virtual education.
Okay, is there a second? I see a second, Ms. Hines. Any discussion? All those in favor? 7. And opposed? 0. All right, addition of regular board meetings, which we certainly do need to add so that we're not here till midnight. Do I have a motion?
Is that on your to-do, your must-do? I didn't circle that one.
Oh, I thought we had to because the next one's before we meet again.
Yeah,
We were
so
gonna
can
leave
meet
it off,
again.
but if we don't do it, we've got to vote on it because it's February, we put one in February. Is it 8th?
February 8th.
February 8th.
So,
It'll be
I mean, we
quick.
can't wait on it. Sorry, Mr. White, you're trying, I know, I get it. Any emotion? This is really simple, guys, we're just adding, because we normally have them 2 times a month since I've been on this board, those 15 years they gave me this award.
I'll do it. I make the motion that we add the addition of regular board meetings to the 2020, 2021 board meeting schedules in Exhibit H.
Do I have a second? I have a second from Ms. Gardner. And I would simply just say that I think, you know, the board is paid to come to meetings, and I think that when you want to not have so much on one item, if you have more meetings, it's a smart thing to do. So I'm going to support this. Is there anybody that wants to say something about it?
I've got a
Ms. Hines?
question.
Okay, Ms. Hines, I'll get you.
I just have a question. I have questions. I agree. I think, I think board policy says that we are supposed to meet twice a month and we're not. And so, I don't know why that is.
The other board changed it.
Right. I'm just curious as to the decision for the just 2 meetings, February 8th and May 24th, like where those dates came from. When we talk about February, it's a short month, and I know we have a meeting and we have the School Board Association conference, and so I'm just like planning.
I can explain it to you in the
I'm just
officers' meeting.
curious as to.
Let me
Oh,
explain that to you. I got your question. Dr. Melton and Ms. Gardner, and really it was Ms. Gardner and Dr. Melton that looked, we have Easter somewhere in there, and we talked about if we tried to do one, was it March? Ms. Gardner can address that. They were the two dates.
It's April, sorry. We already have 2 in March.
Right, we have 2 in
In
March.
April, it's right after spring break. And so the only time to add them would be February and May, because we already have 2 in
Right.
March, so.
They were just the places to have them. And it's like Dr. Melton said, when you try to have one that Monday you come back from the spring break, she said it's kind of a nightmare for the staff. So we had very good reasons for the reasons we chose.
Okay, another reason why officer meetings should be open, but thank you for that explanation.
Well, you're welcome to come. Okay.
Question.
Yeah, you had one.
You know, and I've heard this referenced several times that the old board took away the meetings.
They did.
I've never been a board officer, but I've always been on a board, and we voted for these calendars. But they were my understanding they came from the superintendent working with the board officers, and they refined based on workloads and the demands they put on our staff. So I guess, Dr. Melton, are you a part of this decision? I mean, is this coming from you wanting these meetings, or is this coming from the board officers?
The board officers and I discussed it when we met last time. We each brought a list of things that we wanted to talk about, so it was shared during that time.
So is this your recommendation to add these meetings?
This recommendation came from the board officers.
Okay, that's different than the past, okay? Because I think in the past it came from superintendents.
Well, you've not been an officer, so you don't really know that. Okay, let's go to the vote. Is there any more statements on it?
Well, I just need to remind everyone that this is the board meetings. These are not the superintendent's meetings, so they should come from us. But we
Yeah.
did clear the dates with her, and she was okay with it, and we're hoping to make these meetings not as long if we get to meet more often. This is to help them, too.
And
Well,
it's-
another way to make the meeting shorter, and I know there's from other boards, is you get more efficient and productive in what we're doing. And we're
Right.
going around in
And
circles.
not changing the
People are
agenda or
texting
spending an
me
hour trying to change
saying
the
we're
agenda.
going around in
Yeah, I
circles.
agree
Mr.
completely
Miller.
with that. I agree. Yes, I agree.
Mr. White, we really don't need you to criticize the board, and I need everybody to understand it's late, and it is a lot of items on here, but a lot of these items were items that Dr. Melton told the board officer she needed on this meeting, okay? So you're paid for the meeting, so we should not complain.
You're misunderstanding my point. My point is the amount of time that we can be more productive in our conversations and how much extraneous stuff we're doing in our conversations. People in the
Like now.
public are saying that.
Okay.
Right now.
They're
Miss-
watching us
like-
on
well, Miss-
camera,
well, like
and they're making
Mr.
the
White.
same
Point of order,
Why is that out of order, Mr. Lovelace?
because
White,
you're
Mr.
complaining about exactly what you're doing. You're trying to pontificate on a subject that you're doing exactly what you're saying that you're against.
Okay, listen, guys.
Let's just vote on the thing.
Mr. Lovelace, thank you. Let's vote on addition of regular board meetings. I definitely feel like we need them. All those in favor? That is 6, and those opposed, 1.